Welcome, and in this video we're going to be talking about head gaskets for the G16 GTS 3-cylinder GR Yaris and GR Corolla. Welcome to the SRD Tuning YouTube channel. Welcome, and in this video we're going to be talking about head gaskets for the G16 GTS 3-cylinder GR Yaris and GR Corolla turbo engine, and what head gasket is going to be right for you. So we've got a few head gasket options now available for this particular engine, and it all comes down to how much power and how much boost you're trying to hold into the cylinder. So let's start off with our experience. So we currently hold the UK and Europe's most powerful GR Yaris at 692 wheel horsepower. That was running at 2.9 bar with some nitrous as well. And we did see the head lift. So it's about boost and about how much power we can hold without lifting the cylinder head. Obviously head bolts will change as well. There is a few options of the H11, H13 and now 625 plus custom made JRP bolts. But let's talk about what we have discovered and what we've experienced with this particular engine. So if you're going for an engine that is stock power, you're fine with a stock head gasket. There's no problems at all. They are a multi-layered steel head gasket, and I have one here, which is a stock head gasket. So MLS, very good gasket, stock power. These will be good until you get to about 2.4 bar. Anything more than that, then they do start to suffer, and there's a few areas where they do suffer, and we have seen it because it is an open deck design. It will blow to the nearest water jacket. So there's a few things about this gasket, the stock gasket, which are really good, and there's a few things which are, you know, it's designed for stock power. So this MLS gasket hasn't got a secondary firing ring around the cylinder. So around this part of the cylinder here, there is no overlay around that area. So the next option after this, let's say you want to go, you know, G25 550 and you want to have, you know, 400 plus wheel horsepower, I would go with a 625 plus custom made head stud with a HKS MLL gasket. So this is a multi-layered steel gasket again, but it has an extra firing ring around the cylinder. So we have parts which delaminate and come apart, but in the center we have a solid folded over kind of like a U shape all the way around the firing ring area. So again, that's a good gasket. This is what we ran on Christian's car to 692 wheel horsepower, but it did have some head lift. When we took the engine apart to discover where it had blown from, we could just see that it was just pushing out between one of the cylinders and into the nearest water jacket, which was one of the center. So again, a very good gasket. If you're going to run a 550 and push it fairly hard, HKS MLS gasket, very good option. On the market at the moment, there is the HKS, there is a stock gasket, there is a Vulcan cut ring gasket, which I haven't got one here, but that uses stainless steel rings, which place in the middle of the gasket, and you would then, the outer part, so it's separate. So you've got three separate stainless steel rings, which is your firing ring, and that cuts into the cylinder head and presses down on the block, and then you have like a conventional gasket around the outside to seal water and oil. So Vulcan cut ring gasket. I would say that was probably slightly better than the HKS MLS gasket. Nitto are also bringing out a head gasket for the GR Yaris, and their designs have always been very good. They've always used a separate firing ring area. I've used them in the past on the RBs, and they are very good gaskets, so that is another option. You then move on to, if you want the ultimate, let's say you're going to be going 2.9 bar plus boost on a 62mm turbo, you know, 700 horsepower and above. Maybe 650, 650 wheel horsepower and above. Right, there's only one option. Actually, that is a lie, there's two options. Copper. That brings us on to our next gasket. The next gasket is a copper gasket. So this copper gasket here is, there's two options. There's a 0.7 and a 0.9mm gasket. These are 100% reusable. So you can have this off as many times as you want. If you've got a race engine that you're using and you want to service the engine considerably amount of time throughout the season, let's say 2 or 3 rebuilds, this is the gasket you want to use. It is totally reusable. They come in an unannealed state, so once you get the gasket, you'll have to anneal them, which is fairly easy to do. I'm going to do a video about how to anneal the copperhead gasket. And the very, very next important thing is this. This is a beryllium copper firing ring. So the big powered diesel engines and big powered drag engines use this style gasket, and they use another style gasket as well, but we'll talk about that later. So copperhead gasket, unannealed, you'll anneal it, and then you will spray a gasket coating on it. The only thing this copperhead gasket is doing is sealing water and oil. That's it. The breather, crankcase pressure that comes down, the chain runs through all here, and then the water system. That is the only thing this gasket is going to be sealing, is the water. The main combustion from the entire engine is sealed with a beryllium copper ring. So these have got a receiver groove machined into the bottom of it, and on the cylinder, on the block here, we have our beryllium copper rings already machined in, and again, they are 100% reusable. So I'll see if I can pop one of these out. There you go, beryllium copper ring. So what this does is, these are 3 thou larger in thickness than the copperhead gasket. These also expand at 18% more than the copper. So the idea is you machine the receiver groove in the top of the cylinder, drop these in, copperhead gasket goes on, you clamp it all down, and our main combustion events are all happening inside this ring. And because it's got a receiver groove, there is no way it can blow out. You know, one of the big powered diesel dyno videos where the block splits in half, you know, from the crankcase, but the cylinder head's still bolted on and everything's still bolted onto the top of the engine? They use this style gasket. So a gasket, in my opinion, is a fuse. That is basically how a gasket works. It's the fuse, it's the weak point of the engine. If you go back to Formula 1 days, you know, early 80s and 90s, when they had no head gaskets at all, you'll know what I'm on about. So they're a fuse. MLS gasket, you know, can blow out. They've got a memory of about 9 thousandths or 8-9 thousandths on them. So you clamp the head down, the head can lift, you know, 9 thousandths, maximum 8 thousandths, 9 thousandths, and then it will eject water out of the cylinder, and you'll pressurize the water system, and you'll over pressurize everything basically. So, and that's when you have, you know, water in oil and combustion pressures in the water system, combustion pressures in the crankcase pressure, all kind of horrible, nasty stuff. So that is why we are now going to be moving on to using a copperhead gasket on the engines that we build here, because they're all going to be, you know, 650 horsepower and above. So from our experience so far, the engines they do live at that kind of power. Christian's done probably 6,000 or 7,000 miles on that engine. We've done track days and we've beaten it on the road and quarter mile and done all sorts. And I've had it apart once since it was rebuilt just to see how it was living, and it's all good. So the engines, they can live there. That's not a problem at all for them, as long as we get the combustion, the cylinder pressure and everything under control. So as I was saying, head gasket is a fuse, and there is no fuse. With this style gasket, there is no fuse at all. It will melt a hole in a piston before it does a head gasket. It will bend a rod before it does a head gasket. So there's no weak points anymore with the head gasket on this GR Yaris engine that we're building here at SRD. So just wanted to talk to you a little bit about gaskets, and I thought I explained what approaches we've taken and where we've gone with them, and this is the next step for head gasket technology for the GR. It's an old technology, but it's proven and it works, and drag cars use it, and basically we're getting up there with cylinder pressures now. We know 265 horsepower per cylinder is pretty incredible. So if we want to go more, we need a stronger head gasket, and that is where these beryllium copper rings and copper head gasket goes into it. There is another style of copper head gasket, which is a full copper gasket, and then instead of having these beryllium copper rings, you'll have a stainless steel hoop, which is machined into the cylinder head, and then a receiver groove in the block, and then it actually pushes, once the head gaskets are annealed, it actually pushes the hoop and receiver groove and the copper into a U shape. So once it all gets done up. But let's talk about advantages and disadvantages of copper head gaskets and MLS gaskets and Vulcan cut ring gaskets. So MLS gaskets, user friendly, fairly strong, and that's pretty much about it. Expensive, I would say. Not reusable. So there's the three things. They're user friendly, easy to install. They're fairly strong, but they're not reusable. Okay, so, the fourth one, you must have almost like a mirror finish on both the cylinder head deck and on the block deck. So they have to be very kind of shiny finish to get them to seal up the best. If you've got any little grooves from, the machining marks or CBM cutter or whatever kind of fly cutting that's been done, they may not seal very good. And there is some other things we can talk about, which is Fuji paper, and you can put paper across the deck and do it all up, and you can see where the firing ring is and where the torque is on the paper. So that's another thing to look into, Fuji paper. So that's MLS gaskets, Vulcan cut ring gaskets. Okay, so let's talk about that. Fairly cheap, I would say, in the scheme of things. What else? Hold very good cylinder pressure without delaminating or blowing out, and again they are 3 separate rings and a gasket around the outside, but they're not reusable. So they're expensive, they hold good cylinder pressure, but they're not reusable. Let's go on to Nitto's firing ring gasket and HKS gasket. Again, hold good power, user friendly, not reusable. So, and only limited to X amount of power before they lift and they blow. So all of them are good options if you're staying below the 550 horsepower mark. Below that, you're good. It's not a problem at all. You won't have any issues. Then we move on to the copper gaskets. So the plus side, all right, they're basically indestructible. They're reusable, but they're not very user friendly. So if you're doing this at home in your own garage, you're not going to be able to do it, because we must machine a receiver groove into the block. Now you can send the block to us, that's not a problem, and for £100 we will machine the block for you, ready to receive the copper, beryllium copper rings and we'll get that done, packaged up and sent back to you. Not a problem. We've got a CNC machine here, we can do that. So yeah, the copper head gaskets. If you go for this style, which is the receiver grooves, beryllium rings and copper gasket, it's a good option, but they are expensive. But with the expense they become reusable. So it's a good option. You know, if you're doing, say, a race engine and you're stripping it down 3 times a year to service it and go through it and make sure everything's all good, you know, a HKS MLS gasket might cost you 250 quid or 230 quid a gasket. You know, they're between 180 and 220, 230. 3 of them, you're at 600 quid. So it's expensive to service with MLS. This copper, it's cheap. Yes, the copper and the rings is an expensive gasket overall. As an outlay, they are, ready for it, £590. So it's an expensive option, but they are reusable. In that £590, you will get 3 beryllium copper rings. You will get the copper head gasket ready to go, and you will get the spray adhesive that you'll need to spray over the gasket to seal the water. You'll also get some shims which go between the oil passage and the cylinder head for some extra bite around there, and they're reusable. So I'll do a video of how I'm going to install it and what products I'm going to use, but you'll get it all with you. So £590, sorry, that's £590 plus VAT. Will get you on your way for a reusable head gasket that will hold any amount of power you can throw at it. And the way that this really seals is quite clever. As I said, these expand 18% more when they get hot. So there is always going to be a 3 thou crush on the cylinder head, plus the amount of pressure that we're putting on this surface area is phenomenal. Like, it's absolutely phenomenal. If you think about it, you know, where before you're clamping around the whole load of the whole gasket, now we're clamping around, you know, such a small area. All the clamping force goes onto these 3 rings, and then the rest of it all dissipates over the copper, which just squeezes up enough for the water and the oil. So that's how the copper head gasket works in this. And then you've obviously got the other style, which is receiver groove in the cylinder head and hoops in the cylinder head, receiver groove in the block, and a solid copper head gasket. So there you go, there's gaskets for the G16 and options for you and what applications are going to be running this engine in. We're going to be pushing more and more and more, and we want to push as high powered engines as we can here, and obviously we found the limit of the MLS, and that's why we've decided to develop our own copper head gasket. We have used beryllium rings and copper head gaskets in the past, and we just thought, you know what, it's going to be a good viable option for people out there which are pushing big power up from the GR Yarises. And again, you don't have to push as much power as that if you want a serviceable gasket. This is a very good option. Expensive to start off with, but reusable, so you'll never have to buy another one again. The copper is, you can re-anneal it, you know, you can clean it, it's very easy to handle. They're just a very good option. The beryllium rings, say single piece beryllium copper rings, these are the expensive things. You would never believe it, but actually these are nearly £120 each. So yes, that is the expensive part. That's what makes the gasket seal, and that is the key to all of this, having the correct material down to the correct tolerances with the correct machining. And that's what makes this gasket so wonderful to use, because it's going to hold mega power and it's never going to have a combustion event where it happens, you know, pushes it into the water system. So we're not going to have a pressurized water system. If the head does decide to lift a little bit, it's not that detrimental to us in this scenario. because we're always going to have mega clamping. I mean, we don't see these ever blow combustions out the ring or anything like that. It's always, you know, there's basically no more fuse now. It's more like a mechanical lock on this engine. So thank you for watching, and I hope this was informative to you and your GR Yaris journeys, and I hope you all enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. So peace out.